Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Overnight Success. I am happy to have a guest on here, Tim Delaney. He is with me in Front Row Dads and an amazing entrepreneur. So I'll go ahead and read the intro and then we'll kind of jump into the conversation here. So, Tim is an entrepreneur, real estate investor, and the host of another podcast called Business Buying for Financial Independence. Tim helps professionals escape the 9 to 5 by acquiring existing small businesses and building long term wealth through ownership, which is amazing. I think in entrepreneurship, a lot of times we kind of just back ourselves into another job, hopefully a better paying job. But I love that you are focused more on the escape and building that long term wealth. But thank you, Tim. Welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you on here.
Thanks for having me, John. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, this will be a real good conversation. Obviously, we've had a lot of great conversations through Front Row Dads and things on that side. Today, we'll focus a little bit more on business and the journey that it took to get you here. And so, if you could kind of just give us, a quick high level view of what started your entrepreneurship journey, maybe a couple of the high level stories of like the valleys and things that you experienced and where you are today. We talked about the businesses and how you're buying and selling businesses, but would love to just kind of see how we got here today.
Sure. I grew up in a small business household. So my parents owned a pizzeria when I was younger, and that was moderately successful until they sold their shares of it to family members. And then I watched my father struggle to start his own business in the HVAC space. When that didn't work out, he pivoted and partnered with somebody else on another business, and that was a decent opportunity for him at the time. And so I grew up in around small business. I saw the freedoms that it provided my parents and my family, and the flexibility. And I think deep down, I always knew that I would kind of end up working for myself. There was a period of time during college. I went to school to become a stockbroker. I thought I was super interested in Wall Street and stocks and thought that sounded cool, until about halfway through college when I realized that I have gone somewhat insane to want to go work in an office for 80 hours a week, and kind of pivoted from there and did some other stuff for a while. I was a Peace Corps volunteer and worked in international development for a few years after that, before coming back to Buffalo and trying to start my own business from scratch, the first business I tried to start was a importing business where I used some contacts internationally to develop a really nice handmade leather iPad sleeve. At the time, the iPad was brand new. It did not have a lot of fancy covers on the market. People were using these sleeves to keep it protected, because it was an expensive piece of gear. It still is, but it was even more expensive back then. And around the time my first shipment landed of those iPad sleeves, Apple released iPad 2. Apparently, nobody at Apple thought to consult me on the new dimensions of the product, and my 4,000 sleeves were kind of useless for the new iPad. So it was definitely a low point in my entrepreneurial journey, but it kind of taught me some lessons, and I moved forward from there and realized that I need to be looking longer term and not just looking for quick hits. So it kind of led me down taught me some good lessons in it. And then I had an opportunity to buy a business in that time frame. That particular business that first presented itself did not work out, but it set me on a path of looking for businesses to buy because I realized there was a lot of potential in an established business that the owners were just looking to retire. So that's kind of set me down that path.
Wow. So I kind of want to go back to the iPad sleeves. I guess, did you sell any of those? Were you able to sell some?
Yeah, I think I sold a couple, and I blame Apple for changing the dimensions on the iPad, but internally I own the mistakes that I made as well of not really going all in on that either. It was kind of a side hustle thing. I didn't even make a website for it. I was trying to sell them on eBay at the time. I looked into Etsy, which was just coming out then, but at the time, Etsy was very strict on what they allowed sellers to sell. And since I wasn't making them myself, I wasn't allowed to sell them. And so, that's where I didn't go all in. I didn't make my own website. I just tried to do it on eBay, which wasn't probably the smartest move either. I probably, if I would have tried harder, I might have been able to sell those out to people that still had the first generation iPad. but it would have been an uphill battle and I wouldn't have made the profit that I had initially projected.
Yeah. That's interesting because, I mean, you were I guess we had the cell phone market beforehand, obviously, but you were kind of navigating a newer world, right? Today, all of the case owners know that I'm sure they have, there's probably a site out there that specifies all the dimensions and all that, right? Like, but you didn't even think, one, you probably didn't know when it was coming out, and two, didn't think about the dimension changes. So that's really interesting, but it was your first step into the entrepreneurial world. And to your point, you learned a lot from it, which is a good way to take that little dip there and kind of learn from it. And
Yeah.
so I kind of want to go into, I have some notes here about like kind of going into that first business buy. Because at this point, you mentioned the Peace Corps and things like that. So I know for me, we've talked a little bit about me when I was interested in looking at different businesses, right? Was it Cody Sanchez, right? Talking about like the laundromats and things like that. But it takes money to kind of make money. And so at this point, I haven't heard like, you weren't at Wall Street, so you don't have Wall Street money. I'm curious how you got started in buying that first business.
Yeah. So I definitely did not have Wall Street money like Cody did coming out of her career in banking. After the Peace Corps, I did get a real job working in international development in Ethiopia. I was getting paid in euros and I was living very modestly, well below my means. My wife and I were living in Addis Ababa, which is a thriving capital city with all of the fun things that capital cities offer. But we, instead of buying the fancy imported foods and wines and ingredients that a lot of our foreign coworkers were doing and complaining about those prices because they were expensive, we were living like locals did, buying local food, going to local restaurants, and living very modestly and saving money. So when we moved back to Buffalo, I think we had saved, I don't remember exactly, but probably somewhere around 50-ish thousand. This is in 2010. And we were living off of some of that because my adjusted salary that I negotiated to continue working from Buffalo was a little bit lower and the cost of living in Buffalo was higher. So we were burning through some savings while I was trying to start up, first starting up the iPad thing and then starting to look for businesses. So when it came time to pull the trigger on the wine and liquor store that I ultimately bought, we had about $1,000 left to our name. We were renting an apartment. We owned a car, but the bank probably really owned it. We were still making payments on it. So we emptied our accounts and used that $35,000 to buy the wine and liquor store, which was priced at originally it was priced at $350,000, but when we counted the inventory the night before the closing, we lowered the price to 300 because they had overestimated how much inventory they had. So,
Smart move.
yeah,
That's a great surprise, I guess, right before
yeah,
signing documents.
yeah, and I mean it's typical. It was planned, and they admittedly had no idea how much inventory they had in the store at any given time because they didn't have any kind of point of sale system or live inventory tracking systems. So they estimated high, which was good for me because then the bank was planning on giving me a certain amount of money for a loan. I had a certain amount of money to close. Those sellers were lending me some money as well. So we were planning on that higher amount. So when it was lower, I just had that extra cash in the bank to use as working capital. If they had estimated low and the actual value was a lot higher, we could have had issues at the closing table because, like I said, I emptied my accounts. I didn't have any more cash to bring, and the bank wouldn't have just tacked on extra money at the last minute. We would have had to go through a whole process again. It worked out better that way, and it was planned. When I say surprise, yes, it was a surprise that it was that much. We were kind of anticipating that it would be a little bit lower. The main takeaway is that I was able to buy a business for about 10% down. People, when I talk about buying businesses, people just automatically default to a negative mindset of, well, I don't have the money for that, or I can't afford that. Only wealthy people can afford that. But from my perspective, buying a business isn't just for the wealthy. It's what actually makes you wealthy. So 10% down at the time, $350,000 business that cash flowed immediately for me was, it's less than the median price of a home in the United States right now. And it's paying me. You go buy a $450,000 house right now, and it's just going to keep costing you money every day. It's a very good value proposition for anybody that's kind of thinking differently about the way they want to run their life and the way they want what they want out of life.
Yeah. Now I'm curious about those first couple of years. We've talked a little bit of like where it is today,
Hmm.
but you looked at it on paper, the math makes sense, cool, like let's go purchase this. But curious what maybe those first 6, 12, or 18 months look like for you and your wife.
Well, I bought it, and then the next day I was super wealthy and comfortable, lounging in palm trees. That's why you have me on, right? It's overnight
Yeah, yeah.
success.
We want to know exactly the people, the overnight 1 million that become.
um, no, it was a grind. So I bought the store. It was open 72 hours a week, 9 to 9, Monday to Saturday. We were closed on Sundays at the time. I inherited two part-time employees that worked. One of them worked about 10 to 12 hours a week. The other one worked maybe about 18 hours ish a week. I don't remember exactly. I'd have to go back and look, and then I was alone in the store for the rest of those hours. So um, actually the one was probably a little bit more. They closed, the two of them closed the store every evening from 5 or 6 different days. They showed up at different times until 9. But sometimes I would still be there till close to closing, especially the first couple weeks, to make sure that they knew my point of sale system, which was one of the changes I made day one. So it was a lot. I was there all the time. Don't think I took a vacation the first year, 2 years at least. I might have had somebody fill in for a day so we could go to a wedding at one point. I had a 18-month-old and a 15-month-old at home when we closed on the sale. My wife was working full time, so it was a grind. But as I grew the sales and felt comfortable, I started adding more personnel, and eventually, took 3, 4 years before I added an assistant manager, and then another 2 years of that before I made him a full time general manager of the store. To the point where 7, 8, probably 8 years in, 8.5 years in, I was able to kind of drastically reduce my hours at the store.
Yeah. So as we say, like there's that 8 years to that overnight success.
Yep. It's only took 8 short years to be an overnight success. Which
As
which in the
you're
grand scheme, sorry to
No,
just want
go
to
ahead.
add something on that, because it comes up a lot in the forums online and other discussions with people, is like when people point to that, like, oh, there's no overnight success. And like, yes, you're right. It's not an overnight success. And 8 years is not an insignificant amount of time, but it is a way shorter period of time than working a desk job for 40, 45, 50 years to save up enough money to finally retire and have the freedom and flexibility that you want. In the grand scheme of things, 8 years is relatively overnight. So I just want to kind of touch on that as well.
Yeah. I mean, in the corporate world, 3% raises, basically right even with cost of inflation year over year. Obviously, there's promotions in there if you work hard. I'm curious though, in the middle of that grind, you talked at one point Wall Street 80 hours a week. It sounds like maybe you weren't quite working 80 hours a week in the beginning, but you were working a lot of hours. Was there ever any doubt, or did you see knowing where this was going to go maybe you didn't know it was 8 years, but you had a vision for 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
Yeah, no, never any doubt. I was never putting in 80-hour weeks either. It was a lot, but it was more of the fact that I had to be there at certain hours that was the more difficult part for me than putting in the actual work. Every ounce of energy and time that I put into this, I knew was paying off in building me equity on top of whatever I was able to pay myself in the short term. You can work that, if I compare it, and I never really mentally compared it at the time, but if I was comparing it to working at 60 to 80 hours a week on Wall Street, at the end of that week, at the end of that year, 5 years, 10 years of putting in that time, I would have nothing to show for it, you know, other than whatever I was able to save if I saved. Whereas with owning your own business, every ounce of energy and effort you put in, you're also, in theory, building equity and building a long term asset that can continue to pay you into the future.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's my favorite part of entrepreneurship. In those corporate settings or Wall Street, I don't know if you can quite call that corporate, not exactly the same, but good ideas, you do get rewarded in some cases for really good ideas, but you get a very small percentage of what the reward pays the actual owners of that, right? And so for you, yes, you were working those weird hours and putting that extra time in, but you knew that the ROI on that was almost exponential. It was great. And it's amazing. To your point, 8 years is nothing really in the grand scheme of things. And to know that you were able to build it over 8 years is great. And I'm sure you learn a lot at that case too. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs that I meet are big into personal development where we just want to learn more things. And so the easiest way to do it is get your hands on those things, try things. Sometimes you miss. I'm sure you tried some promotions and different things at the store and that just were flops. And then other things took off that you didn't think were going to take off. So, I mean, I think that's the other fun thing is just you live and learn. And, we're talking from that. I'm curious when you started looking into real estate, was it the liquor store gave you, I'm assuming, this ability to then go look at invest in other things? Again, corporate, after 20 years, maybe you'd have that money to try to invest in something, but this happened a lot quicker. So I'm curious when you started looking at real estate, maybe the why and kind of what that, not a transition because you're doing both now, but like what that lifestyle looked like.
Yeah, I don't know why or what, but I always had an interest in real estate. I can remember back when I was somewhere between 14 and 16 years old, the Buffalo Sabres, our hockey team, built a new arena downtown Buffalo. And I had been going to the games with my father since I was young at the old stadium. And the new stadium wasn't that far away, it was only a few blocks away. But you had to walk through a different part of town to get to the stadium. It's called the Cobblestone District. It's a very old section. And at the time, this was mid 90s, it was very derelict, old warehouses from the 1800s, these old brick buildings that were falling apart, cobblestone streets, hence the Cobblestone District name. And I remember walking into the arena for the first time and like looking at some of those buildings and saying, it'd be really cool to buy these buildings and fix them up and put apartments in and make them like all nice looking. But in my mind, I always thought you needed to have lots and lots of money to do something like that. And again, I thought real estate in general was something that you had to be wealthy to do, not something that actually could make you wealthy. And so it wasn't until I had been running the liquor store for a few years and started doing okay and having regular cash flow that I had started mentioning to some people that I was thinking about getting into real estate. And two things happened because I talked about it out loud. Number one, I was at lunch with my business banker and the branch manager one day, and I mentioned that I was thinking about getting into real estate. And the branch manager was like, "Oh, that's awesome." He's like, "I'm in real estate. This is what I do." And he said, "I buy these old rundown houses for pretty cheap. I borrow money from a private lender to buy them. So I don't go to the bank because the bank would never lend on them. They're in such bad condition. I get them all fixed up and then I put tenants in and then I go to a real bank and get a loan to pay off my private lender and get all my money back that I used to rehab it. And so essentially I own the house for no money." And I thought to myself, that sounds like some late night infomercial that I just ignore like categorically because it can't possibly be real. But because I'm hearing it from my banker, who I trust with money and knows what he's talking about and not trying to sell me a course or anything about it, I actually, that makes sense. And so as I started looking into that, somebody else told me, you got to listen to this podcast called Bigger Pockets. And so I started listening to that and they talked about this method of buying real estate with no money, no or low money, which is they have an acronym called BRRRR, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And it was exactly what my banker had described. And had I not heard him describe it to me first, I probably would have just disregarded that podcast and thought that they were a bunch of infomercial people trying to suck money out of me. And so that's what I kind of started doing. I had one commercial acquisition before I did that, but then I started using that method to buy houses. Even though I was been able to acquire a decent portfolio with very little of my own money putting into it, I having the business and the cash flow from the business and the ability to borrow against the business if I need it gave me like a safety net or a backstop of, okay, well, even if things go really wrong with this house and tenants stop paying or everything breaks at once and I need cash, a lot of it in a pinch, like in it quickly, I knew in the back of my mind that I would be able to either borrow some money from the business or go to the bank and get a loan against my business for a short period of time. And that kind of safety net just gives you some mental peace of mind that I like having. If I had been doing this with no safety net of a business, like if I was working on Wall Street or any other corporate job and trying to buy houses the way that I've been doing it, number one, I might not have been as aggressive because I might have been too concerned about, well, what if things go wrong? I'm on a fixed income of, I'm only going to make this much this year. And if the water heater and the furnace and the roof and windows all go at once, I might not have enough money to pay for all of them. That's kind of the mindset with a regular paycheck of I can't go to the bank and say, hey, can you lend me money against my job? Because they won't do that. And then the other aspect of that is I haven't been aggressively trying to pull cash flow out of those rental properties either because I have the cash flow from the business. So I'm in a position where been able to buy kind of on a thinner profit margin projection for the first few years because I'm not relying on that business. I'm not trying to quit my job and go all in on real estate. I'm just trying to supplement my long-term income and asset base, which allows me some flexibility and balance for the future without needing all of that cash right now.
Yeah. I mean, so you're definitely looking at this as more of a long-term investment, and you're able to do that because of the business that you've built. And, you mentioned earlier in the desk job, it's, 30, 40 years to retire at the end. Have all of these different vehicles in which you're setting yourself up for retirement and not have to wait until it compounds, 8% or, 10% year over year. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know some tax gurus and some financial independence, retire early people will come after me for this, but I generally don't use traditional retirement accounts either because I have my cash available to live off of now, knowing that I will have cash flowing assets into the future that will continue to pay me, or I sell them all at some profit in the future as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the greatest, I know I'm not the real estate expert, so some of this might not be true, but I know we've had those crashes, right? But it does work its way back up. So that's great. I'm curious, when you bought the liquor store, was your plan to use that as a tool later on, or was your only focus at the time, hey, this is a business that I know I could turn into something, and maybe that would be the end all be all?
My plan was, I knew it was a business I could grow. I knew it was a business that could provide uh, a satisfying life and lifestyle for me in the medium to long term. I knew that it would not be my last endeavor. I knew that I wanted to do other things, which is why from day one, I took the approach of never making it completely reliant on me, setting up systems, setting up processes, and creating a business and always thinking about it as a business, not as a job, so that I wouldn't have to be in it every day forever.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, I love that you're talking about systems and processes. You talking that they didn't really have a good inventory tracking. They had no POS system, which blows my mind. What year was this again when you bought it?
2013.
2013. I mean, there were things in place. I don't know if Square was in place, but I mean, like, there was enough out there. I
Yeah.
remember my aunt and uncle, when they owned the farm market, like, there was at least enough, even like basic POS systems that, you would track it and things like that. So he pretty much just had like an adding machine calculator, right? Of, you type in the
Yep.
prices, and yeah, there's the you owe me $45 type deal.
Yeah.
That's
One of those
interesting.
big old registers where you push in the numbers and it printed out the little receipt tape with no names of anything, just the numbers that you pushed in, which leaves a lot of room for error on the cashier's part, especially when you're busy, or things, they used an old price gun. If somebody mispriced the wine that was supposed to be $19.99 as $9.99, no one would ever know that they lost money on those bottles because they wouldn't realize it. The cashier wasn't paying attention to, they're just reading the price tag that was on the bottle. And it worked for them. They owned the store for 20 years. They made a lot of money. They were happy. They didn't want or need to implement new things. And that's the type of business owner that is out there. And there are a lot of them out there right now that just, they didn't, they might have a website, but it's because some guy from some big conglomerate talked them into overpaying for some generic website that isn't really doing them any good anyway. And they don't want to hear anything about it. They don't have any social media because they don't care. They don't want it. They're making enough money as it is. They're not paying more people to do more stuff that they don't know if they'll see the return in their ownership lifespan. So that's why I'm, trying to get the word out there of finding these opportunities that exist, that you can add a lot of value very quickly with minimal inputs.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I know my uncle, they had a local farm market. I think it was about 25 years. They were able to retire at 55. They were semi-retired kind of leading into that. And he said, if I had 20 more years, he had a laundry list of things that he would do. He goes, but I'm on my way out. Like, why? If I could take a month off, in January every year and then go golfing almost any time throughout the summer because he had the systems and the things in place. Like, why would I change that? And he's got to figure it out. He's like, I'm definitely at the retirement age, and then that's great too because I think back kind of comparing the desk job versus owning a business. Once you get to a phase, you can kind of sit back and put those things in place. There's no slacking. There's no like dialing it back when you're at that desk job to an extent. And a lot of times, if you put yourself on those promotions, you're actually asking for more responsibility, which comes with salary increases. But you can't just say one day, "Hey, I just want to go and clock in and clock out." It's very hard to get out of that if you work your way up to where you want to be. So that's really exciting. I thought I had a question as far as the business buying goes. Did they have it listed for sale? How did you find it? Kind of want to, with you being an expert on like the business buying stuff, curious how you found it. Were you looking at 25 different businesses or, things fell into your lap? Curious how you found that and started that process.
Yeah. So the first business buying opportunity that I looked at was something that kind of fell in my lap. It was a retail gourmet kind of food slash cookware slash kitchen stuff with a coffee roaster. That one somebody just brought to my attention because they knew I was looking into starting a business and struggling with it. And the owner of that was looking to sell. After I did the numbers and analysis and made them an offer, that didn't work out, but it opened my eyes to, hey, I can borrow money from a bank, buy a business, and get a paycheck day one, never have to worry about when you're starting from scratch, there's always this kind of back of mind thing of, well, can I afford to pay myself yet? And how much can I afford to pay myself? Should I be reinvesting, this dollar? Every dollar that you're paying yourself in a startup mode is a dollar that could have been reinvested to grow the business. So when I kind of ran this opportunity and was like, this actually is kind of cool. So then I went down a rabbit hole of looking for businesses to buy because that one didn't work out. And I talked to business brokers. I talked to accountants and lawyers and financial advisors and pretty much anybody I could get coffee, lunch with. I knew had contact with business owners to try to find something. The particular wine and liquor store was listed with a broker. I had put a couple offers on different businesses with that broker before that never panned out. And when this store came up, they reached out to me immediately because they thought it would be a good fit for me. I had been, up to that point, categorically denying any wine and liquor store because I didn't want to have a wine and liquor store. I was looking for a business that I could take online. Again, this is 2012, I'm looking. So I wanted something I could take online, and I knew wine and liquor would be a huge challenge to sell online and to ship and all these things, legalities. But this particular store, I knew the town that it was in, and I knew that there was plenty of opportunity in that town for this store. Like I said, the owners were tired. They didn't see the need to improve or change anything they were doing because they were making enough money as it was. And I knew that there was room to grow it. So I moved forward with it, made an offer, and kind of went through, we went through the broker. The broker kind of helps you manage all that stuff. It's, as with real estate or other things, buying off market direct can be super advantageous. There's a lot of pros to doing it that way. You might get a better deal because in this case, the sellers are paying the broker a 10% commission on the sale. So the price just kind of has to be a little bit higher than it would be otherwise. But having somebody in between, especially for a first deal, it was their first time selling a business. It's my first time buying a business. It really helps to have that intermediary person that can help walk both parties through. Not that I got cold feet. I don't know if they ever did or not, but the broker helps bring people back to the table when things aren't going super well either. And they can help with the banking. They can help introduce you to lawyers and accountants and bankers and all that kind of stuff as well. So I get asked a lot, do you recommend going through a broker? Yes and no. If you can avoid it, fine, as long as you're confident in the process. If you go through a broker, make sure that they're adding value, and it's usually the seller that's paying for them. So you don't have to worry about that from the buying side.
Yeah, that's great. Kind of want to start wrapping up a little bit here. I would love to hear, I guess there's kind of two personas you could probably talk to. Somebody that is at a desk job and looking to get out of it, as well as maybe a business owner that is looking for their next thing. And I don't know if those are two completely different conversations, but would love to kind of know what you would say to either one of those type of people right now listening.
Yeah. To the person at a desk job that is working for a corporation, the first thing that I usually tell people is to take a deep look at your company and at your career trajectory and ask yourself, is it actually as secure as you think it is? I talk to a lot of people working corporate jobs that swear that they are in such a more secure position because they have a 9 to 5 job and businesses always fail and, that kind of thing. And I feel that especially in today's environment with massive layoffs going on again, we're at the end of 2025 here. Uh, Most 9 to 5 jobs are not as secure as people think they are. And if you're somebody that has explored financial independence, the FIRE movement, if you've tried a side hustle, if you have bought a piece of real estate or two, an investment piece of real estate that you realize isn't going to get you out of your job anytime soon because the cash flow is just not there these days, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at buying an existing business. It's not as complicated as it might appear. It's not as expensive as it might seem, and there are a lot of opportunities out there. Just take a listen to my podcast, Business Buying for Financial Independence. You'll hear a lot of stories from other people that have bought businesses, including ones where they've paid no money out of pocket. Episode 5 with Lindsay Zajac. She bought a cash flowing business with no money out of her pocket. So there's opportunities out there. But to somebody that already owns a business and looking for a change, I have, when I started doing real estate on the side with the liquor store, I told some people that I was looking to get into real estate, but I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't make a big, huge public persona shift of any kind like that. So it was really no change. I slowly weaned hours away from the liquor store and spent more in real estate. And now with the shift that I'm making towards my podcast and speaking and educating people more on buying businesses, I'm making that shift a little bit more publicly. And it is a little intimidating because I've been known as the wine and liquor guy for a while. I have a ton of YouTube content out there of me drinking and talking about wine and liquor. So it is a little bit more daunting of a proposition, but at the end of the day, who cares if I fail in this endeavor and nobody wants to hear about buying businesses in a year or two? Well, I just go back to selling more wine and liquor or doing more real estate or doing something else. And if I wasn't in a industry like wine and liquor, which is highly regulated and can change at the will of the government at any given time, I would be looking to acquire more businesses in that industry. I'd be, buying other stores or buying vertically into suppliers and into distributors. But because it's regulated, I can't do that. It doesn't make sense for me to try that. But if I was in a different type of business, I would be looking to acquire other small businesses in that, either horizontally, which is in the same type of space that you're in, if another retail store or another restaurant or another HVAC company, or going vertically. So if you're in an HVAC company, buy one of your suppliers. Buy a trucking maintenance repair company that is servicing your fleet. Buy into one of the tool manufacturers that you use a lot, or one of the software providers, or something like that. Because I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow yourself because you already know the space by acquiring some of these other small businesses in your industry.
I like that. Buying more businesses is good, like making sure you can balance owning multiple, but staying in that same industry or in industry adjacent is really smart versus having two completely different businesses. You might be an expert in the business you have for the last 5 or 10 years. Trying to relearn a brand new business would be a lot.
I also don't think it's a huge problem for certain people. If you set up your systems, I mean, it's you guys, you talk a lot about systems. That's what you do for people as well. If you set up your systems right as an owner to a point where you can feel confident and comfortable not spending every waking minute in that business, and you're the type of person that likes a challenge and likes to do something new, there's nothing wrong with going out and buying a completely different business in a different industry, especially buying an existing one rather than starting from scratch. Because like I've said before, that you have something to work off of. They might not be the best systems, but you already have something in place to start from. You look at people like Richard Branson and Warren Buffett and a lot of others out there that have done and do lots of different businesses in different industries. So don't tell yourself you can't do it just because it's completely different, but make sure your systems and processes are 100% intact and ready to go if you're going to do a complete pivot.
I think there's energy that comes from that too, to your point. So if you do enjoy the building part of the business and you at least already have a small blueprint as you purchase that new business, like go get that new energy from that new venture. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Uh, Tim, on the podcast Overnight Success, what does success look like to you? It can come from a lot of different angles, but curious, that you're kind of living this. What does success mean to you?
Freedom comes to mind, just the flexibility, freedom to do what I want when I want with whom I want. So, at this stage of my life, it's trying to spend more time with my kids and my wife and family in general, and having that flexibility to do that on my terms is what success is.
Awesome. I love that, Tim. Yeah, thank you. So, best way to get a hold of you or to learn more about you and buying businesses is your podcast, Business Buying for Financial Independence. You've been doing that for a little bit now, so plenty of examples to your point of, I'm sure, different industries, different ways that people have financed it, things like that. I also see on my notes here that you have a business analysis spreadsheet. How can people get a hold of that?
Yeah, if they go to powerofbiz.com, that's biz.com, slash overnight success podcast, they will be able to download that spreadsheet for free.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So very easy. We'll make sure we put those in the show notes. But I think that's great because again, can be seem very scary from the outside if you've never done it before. So having that spreadsheet would be really powerful. But thank you, Tim, for coming on here. Love your journey of how you got to where you are today. Definitely some amazing nuggets in there as far as people looking to get into the business world if they're at a desk job or if they're looking for something different. Plenty of opportunities out there. But thank you, Tim. Really appreciate your time on here. And if anybody's listening and want to learn more, again, business buying for financial independence podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.